who has the most to prove this season?
This will be the first year that eyes are on Mel Tucker.
Tuck's coming. Tuck's coming. What more does he really have to prove to them? Michigan, right now, has a chance to repeat.
There is an elephant on Jim Harbaugh's back, and maybe until he wins a national championship, Jim Harbaugh will always wear that. He still hasn't beaten Michigan State, hasn't won at Ohio State. They got waxed in the college football playoff.
Ooh.
All right, guys. Michigan State, Jim Harbaugh, Mel Tucker. If I ask you the question, who has the most to prove this season, Tucker or Harbaugh, who would you say?
Is it me?
Sure.
Tucker. Mel Tucker, Michigan State. Here's why. And it's not a biased question. It's not a loaded question. I just think Mel Tucker. When you look at it from the end, and keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, listen, we didn't say who's on the hot seat. Because I don't want you guys going back and say, oh, they said Mel Tucker's on the hot seat. Or
Nobody
they said
said
Jim
that.
Harbaugh might be on the hot seat. Nobody said that. We said who has the most to prove in this season. Is it Mel Tucker, Michigan State? Is it Jim Harbaugh at University of Michigan? And it's Mel Tucker and Michigan State. This is why last year, or 2 years ago, they were 2-4. Nobody wanted Mel Tucker there. They were 2-4. They were trying to scream to get rid of him, get him out of there. They beat Michigan. Next year, they go 11-3. And they beat Michigan. Nobody was expecting anything out of Michigan State last year, nor were they expecting anything out of Michigan. Michigan State goes 11-3. They beat Michigan, and then they had some trouble along the way. But here's the kicker. You beat Michigan, that's all fine and dandy. Cool, you beat Michigan. You lost to Michigan State by 100 points. Adam. You lost to Michigan State by 100 points. You lost to Ohio State by 100 points. You beat Michigan, and you controlled your destiny, and then you stubbed your toe against Purdue. Then even in the ball game, Kenny Pickett doesn't play. You almost lose to a backup quarterback. And then the backup quarterback gets injured, and then you play the third-string quarterback, and then you win that game. I think for Mel Tucker, K9 covered up a lot last year. Okay? K9 covered up a lot. He's a tremendous running back, one of the best seasons we've seen in the Big Ten, a single rushing season. He covered up for a sorry offensive line, and he covered up for a less than average, the secondary. That's what he did. This year, you no longer have K9, but now there's pressure on you because they paid you, Ryan, $10 million a season. You're being paid. $10 million a season is what Mel Tucker's essentially being paid. This will be the first year that eyes are on Mel Tucker. Nobody was watching Mel Tucker 2 years ago. As soon as he got out of Colorado, nobody was watching him. Nobody was watching Mel Tucker last year until the Michigan State game. Now, coming into the season, you're not under the radar anymore, Mel Tucker. Michigan State, you guys aren't under the radar. People picked you 14th. So he's under more pressure because I think with Michigan, they're Big Ten champs. They're returning Big Ten champs. Nobody picked Michigan last year, but they're better on offense than they were last year. So I don't think they have the same concerns. Michigan State, Mel Tucker, more to prove to me.
I'll be a little short on this one, but like you said, MSU, sure, he's got a show again. He's getting paid. But the MSU fans, Tuck's coming. They're going to still say Tuck's coming next year, and they're going to say Tuck's coming the next year after that. Harbaugh has got a big decision on his hands, on his quarterbacks, and he's got a team that's ready to repeat now. So I'm going to say this. If you want a chance to win the Big Ten again and beat Ohio State again, I think Jim Harbaugh is under more pressure this year. Because MSU, they're always going to say, like I said, I'm going to keep saying it, Tuck's coming, Tuck's coming. What more does he really have to prove to them? As long as they make a bowl game, they're going to be happy. Michigan, right now, and maybe next year as well, has a chance to repeat. It's their best chance to make it back-to-back. Because after this year, you don't know what the hell's going to happen with NIL and what other teams are coming to the Big Ten. Michigan's ready to win now.
But we said who has the most to prove. And that proving isn't...
Pressure.
Proving and pressure are two different things. If you pressure and proving are two different things. I said Michigan State and Mel Tucker, they have to prove that he's worth the $10 million that he's getting. They have to prove that they are...
They already think he's worth it.
But they have to prove... No, they do.
Yeah.
We ain't talking about East Lansing. We're talking about the whole country. We're talking about proving to the whole country. You got to prove that he's worth the $10 million. You got to prove that you've arrived. That Michigan State is back in the good standings that they were in 2015 when they won the Big Ten, or 2013 and 14 and 15 when they won the Big Ten, when they won the Rose Bowl. You got to prove that you're back to that. Michigan won the Big Ten championship last year with a team nobody thought was going to do that. Their whole team is young. Michigan's going to have this talent. Cade McNamara has another year. J.J. McCarthy, if he stays, has another year.
Yeah, maybe.
Blake Corum another year, Andrew Anthony another year, the whole team, the whole defense, whole year. Those guys are still young, and they're potentially better than they were last year. I don't think they have much to prove.
Your question was, who's under more pressure?
I said who has the most to prove.
Yeah, okay, I'll say this. I think Jim Harbaugh has the most pressure, and I think Jim Harbaugh has the most to prove, too, because there are a segment of people out there, a large segment of people out there, that believe he still hasn't beaten Michigan State or Mel Tucker. He hasn't won at Ohio State.
Right.
They got waxed in the college football playoff. And he tried to go back to the NFL, and if offered the job, he would have gone to the NFL. And Michigan's recruiting class, numbers-wise, rankings-wise, is not even near the top 10, top 15. I don't even know if they're in the top 20. So there's 5 elements there that I think Jim Harbaugh, and it took him 7 years to win the Big Ten. There is an elephant on Jim Harbaugh's back, and maybe until he wins a national championship, that will always carry, Jim Harbaugh will always wear that. I think for Mel Tucker, he's got a lot to prove, too, because he's got to prove that he just wasn't some one-trick pony that you could go out and get this transcendent running back in the portal, Kenneth Walker III, and that success wasn't predicated on that. Let's see you do it without K9. So I think he's got a lot to prove, but I think he'll have time to do that. I think a lot of pressure, and Jim Harbaugh has a lot to prove as well. Both things for me on that.
So then the way I look at it, then, and that means that it makes no sense to ever ask the question who's under more pressure or who has more to prove, the Michigan State coach or the Michigan coach or the Michigan State team or the Michigan team, because the answer is always going to be Michigan. Because that's what
I agree.
Because that's what it seems like.
Yeah.
And so this is when I try to bring to the table, like a fair comparison. But then we get to that point, and you make a lot of sense with that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things to unpack with Jim Harbaugh and his Michigan team this year in terms of things you got to prove.
Let's face it.
Yeah.
Here's the facts. Michigan is always going to be talked about more than Michigan State.
Yeah.
Even when Michigan sucked and Michigan State was winning Big Ten championships.
Now it's why does Michigan suck?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Cowboys. They're kind of like the Dallas Cowboys.
That's a good one.
How many times do you turn on Skip and Shannon?
That's all they talk about.
And they're friggin' talking about the Cowboys.
Cowboys out of the playoffs. Still
Cowboys suck. And the Cowboys probably aren't going to make the friggin' playoffs this year. But the Cowboys always seemingly during the NFL season, no matter what happens on Sunday, when you tune in to Skip and Shannon on Monday morning, they're talking about what the Cowboys did.
And they got the national game usually. One of them.
Exactly.
They're usually on prime time.
There's a lot of correlation there to Michigan. Good, bad, or indifferent. It's just the way it is. So being the head coach at Michigan, you're always going to have more pressure and more to prove.
I agree.
Just my opinion.
I agree. I understand that. I still think Mel Tucker has more to prove. Because last year, at one point, he was the highest paid coach in NCAA, and he was coming off a season where he was 2-4. He has to answer for that offensive line and that secondary this year. He has to answer for K9 no longer being there. He has to answer for losing to Purdue after beating Michigan, controlling your destiny. He has to answer for 56-7 was the final score with Ohio State and Michigan State. You guys didn't even show up. So I think he has more to prove from that standpoint.